Hello and welcome back to Sean in the Shed. And on the show today, we've got John Broadbent, who's the Deputy Headmaster at Rothwell Victoria Junior School here in Yorkshire. Welcome to the show, John.
Hi, Sean. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
And before we get started, we always talk about where you're from, how you grew up and your education, your career. So maybe you can start us off by telling us your story.
Okay, so as a child, I spent my childhood in a town called West Bromwich, which is about 7 miles outside of Birmingham, and went to Birmingham University to study economics. So I had no intention at the time to become a teacher. Then ended up working at a bank for HSBC. Didn't really enjoy that, and then kind of took my hand to teaching after volunteering in one of my friend's mum's school, who was a head teacher at the time, and went down to London to Brunel University to do my PGCE. Spent 4 years teaching in the borough of Ealing in London, then moved to Coventry, as people do, and did 2 years at Coventry. And I've been for the last 14 years, I've been at Rothwell Victoria, which is just 6 or 7 miles outside of Leeds in the south of the city. And I've been deputy head there for the last 10, and I live in Selby with my wife and 2 children.
That's great. And the topic today is AI in education. But before we get into AI in education, you were a teacher long before AI came on the scene. So how has AI changed from the sort of before to the after? What was teaching like without artificial intelligence? And is it better or worse now?
I think it's an interesting question. I think for me personally, the workload side of things are better, particularly from the administrative side, so where you're creating lesson resources or lesson presentations, or as I'm a senior leader, where you're doing like policy writing or communications, etc., staff meetings, CPD and all of that. AI can have a real benefit to kind of streamline that work and make it more efficient. Before AI, obviously you had to do all that stuff manually. So although you had technology to help you, there was a lot of work that you had to put into that technology. Whereas I feel now with a good prompt, you can get, not that you necessarily just go with what it gives you, but it can do a lot of the heavy lifting for you, and then you just kind of have something to work from to adapt. So it's a big time saver. I think where I think we've got to be careful, and we may come on to this later, is how we implement it in schools and be really thoughtful of the kind of the safety and ethical side of things, because online safety and social media and etc. is probably one of youth's kind of biggest societal issues at the moment. So how we kind of teach the next generation to use artificial intelligence is probably quite something we've got to think about.
And I guess if you look at your community, your school, you're an AI enthusiast. So you're like pushing the bounds. You're interested in building agents. You play around with Copilot, Gemini. I know you're a big fan of Notebook LM. What's it like for other teachers? Do you find that some people just dive straight in? Others are a bit more concerned about the data, the ethics, the privacy issues. What are you finding on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, like immediately in our school, I suppose I started out about 18 months ago with staff meetings around how AI could help with workload, because I think you've got to do a staff first approach, and the biggest buy-in is workload, because workload is quite an issue in teaching, as in it's insurmountably high. Then I think outside of my kind of local domain, reaching out to like the local authority and other head teachers in what we've got like a cluster of 8 schools called a family of schools. There's not much out there. There's so I've kind of offered help to the local authority, not done anything actually tangible with them yet, but I have also reached out, and I did recently did a little bit of an hour introduction to AI, which really only scratches the surface, to kind of 8 local head teachers, and they really weren't necessarily aware of what they could do, or had any real governance oversight as to what was going on in their schools. So I've done a few staff meetings here, and our teachers are pretty keen to use it to kind of help workload and the administrative side of teaching and adapting resources. So I can go into a little bit later on maybe some of the specifics that we find are the wins that you can get from using AI, alongside how perhaps we have rolled it out in school, because we've got I feel I've got quite a measured kind of linear approach, and we are probably about phase 3 of our kind of 5-phase implementation.
And you're right, it's all about AI adoption. There is a payback, I guess, once a teacher has learned how to use the tools, going from using a simple chatbot to perhaps creating a Copilot agent or a Gem agent. They do get their time back after they've learned how to develop these new skills. So maybe we can dive right into some of the examples of how you use it in school, and what the benefits are in terms of the outcomes, hours saved, but also more importantly, the learning outcomes, the improvement to teaching and learning.
I think it's probably a bit early to kind of ultimately see what impact it's had on standards, at the moment. But certainly from a teaching point of view, I think one of the big wins that we looked at was adapting like reading material. So if you've got a piece of reading that you may be doing in something like science, and you're reading about, I don't know, electricity to year 6, you can have children of different reading ages. So you might have your core text that's kind of pitched for that 10, 11 reading age, but you'll have children in the class that maybe aren't quite as up there with that kind of level of fluency and reading ability. So you can use your AI tool to adapt that text. So you could say, you can prompt it to keep the core gist of the content, so no key learning's lost, but reduce the reading age to 8 or increase the reading age to 12. So that's a real advantage that you can do, because then you haven't got that issue where a child that's reading at a lower age, they're still reading it in kind of their social maturity content, if you know what I mean, rather than just reading a book that they're too old for, or the book's too young for them. But then on the flip side, you can take your reading age up without having the danger of pushing into age inappropriate content, because what you find with the reading ages that are like 14, 15, the content's not suitable for a 10-year-old. So you can just get it to change the vocabulary. So we use that a lot, and to generate questions for reading comprehensions. So you can use your assessments to focus on, you can look at your assessment information. I mean, you can even get AI to analyze your assessment information, which we can come on to in a bit. You can take your assessment information, you can give, so let's say, for example, the children are not very good on a certain area of reading. I've then written a Gemini gem that would generate those questions based on just that strand, because there's about 7 different strands at Key Stage 2 for reading. And then that gem has the national curriculum and the reading assessment framework as its kind of background knowledge base. So it's referring to, so that it's going to be pitched appropriately, because it's using curriculum documentation to generate its content, which is not something that you just learn to do overnight. I have kind of gone on a bit of a journey. So my workload probably for the first, without a choice, I didn't really feel like I was working, probably did go up a bit, because I ended up, a bit like people fall down a TikTok rabbit hole. I probably went down a Copilot rabbit hole, and things like that. But I've probably come out the other side of that now, and probably reaping the benefits as are the rest of the staff.
And so it's obviously great for inclusive education differentiation. Your school has both an instance of Microsoft and Google. Maybe you can explain to the audience how you switch between using Microsoft and the AI tools within that ecosystem, and when you flip out to Google, because you've got Google Classroom, haven't you? And I guess you use Microsoft Teams. Yeah. So perhaps if you could describe that.
Yeah, and I mean, the reason why, just to start off, the reason why we use Microsoft and Google is because they're school educational licenses. So from a data protection point of view, we are only permitted on work devices to use, AI tools within our tenants, so within our Google and Microsoft ecosystem. I tend to use Microsoft for the output. So if I want to, for example, in my role as deputy head, if I wanted to write a new assessment policy, I could take the old assessment policy, the current guidance from the government, the local authority, whoever, and get it to kind of merge those two together to create a new policy. So I do find Copilot's quite better at generating a more detailed content level, but then I find Google is better at the presentation and the look of things. So I might take something from Copilot and then put it into Gemini to maybe just present it better, or create like an infographic, which is just like a kind of like a kind of one-page poster version of that kind of written content. I do think Copilot's infographics look a bit clinical, almost like a kind of COVID advice poster, as opposed to something befitting of a primary school setting. But then I also think that Google, from a non-specialist, I've not got a computer science background or a coding background or anything. I think that producing like is it called agentive AI, where you create your agents? Gemini gems are easier to put together and work, well for kind of basic repetitive tasks than Copilot agents do. And I think I don't know why necessarily, but I just find that easier. So I tend to use Gemini for creating gems and putting glitter on things, and then Copilot does like the heavy lifting and the content creation.
Let's touch upon Notebook LM, which is one of Google's new platforms. You're a big fan of it. Maybe you can describe to the audience what is Notebook LM and what the benefits are of using that as a teacher, as a busy teacher. Okay,
so from my understanding, Notebook LM is what's called a source-grounded large language model. And source-grounded as in it doesn't, like other generative AIs like Copilot, Claude, ChatGPT, etc., doesn't just go out to the wide world web and pull off all sorts of information. It will work with and synthesize the sources that you give it. So, for example, I've got many. A quick one at the moment, we've got Key Stage 2 SATs next week, and so I've put all of this statutory test guidance into Notebook LM. So the test administration guidance, the notes for readers, extra time, etc., all the different rules and regulations around administering SATs. So there's about 10 sources in Notebook LM, and from there I could ask it questions like, what do I do if a child breaks their arm? How do I apply for a scribe? Can you give me the key points that someone as a one-to-one reader needs to be aware of, and things like that? And it will search that information and then generate, further content based on just the information that you give it. We find it really useful when we're monitoring as well. So if I'm doing a round of lesson observations, I can take handwritten notes from the different people that are doing the observations, scan them in, and it will very quickly analyze that. But not just analyze it, I can get it to cross-reference the findings from the observation against my previous Ofsted report, my current school development plan, and then I can bring in evidence-based research from companies like the Education Endowment Foundation, not companies, but organizations like the Education Endowment Foundation, and go, okay, these are our findings. Now take those findings and it's really powerful, and you can create video, you can create slide decks, you can create video overviews. So you can almost create like podcasts like we've got now. You can then interact with that podcast. So if I was doing a safeguarding policy, I could turn it into a 10-minute video, then someone can ask it a question and then the host will search and reply. Really powerful. I think Copilot have brought out something called Copilot notebooks or something, but Notebook LM is that good and I've got that much content there, I'm probably not going to look at the Copilot version. It's really powerful. And I think from a leadership point of view, from a school leader or subject leader point of view, it's probably the best AI tool, if you had to pick one, that you could use. Whereas I think your generative AI is there for class teachers to create resource content.
So as we bring the talk to a close and we reflect on the future, that the rate of change of AI is just scary, it's exhilarating. How do you keep up to date with it? And what would your advice be to new teachers who are maybe slow starting on their AI adoption journey to sort of dive in and get started?
I think from a lead teacher point of view, I think you've got to first of all come up with how you want to roll AI out and really think about the kind of ethics and safety side of things. So you would have to, right, so like we went with a staff only approach. We restricted the tools you could use to the ones that existed within our tenant, train staff in what you can and can't put in. So no personal identifiable information. And then also being aware of that critical thinking and not just accepting what it puts out. For a teacher, if I was a early career teacher or someone starting out, I would say the biggest gain you're going to get as a classroom teacher is being able to take a resource and then adapt it multiple ways for different abilities. And then from there, that'll kind of give you a buy-in, and you'll see the benefit pretty much instantly. And then that'll probably get your curiosity going to then just delve into other things. As a subject leader, writing policies, monitoring information, cross-referencing, the kind of things that should happen with what's going on. It's really powerful. So yeah.
A lot of the prompting goes on in private. Do you have conversations in the staff room on how you're using AI? How prevalent and important is AI, or it's not really that important? It's still below the surface. Is it something that gets talked about in the staff room a lot? And how do you share that best practice?
We do. I've had about 4 or 5 staff meetings now, and staff are now going to the point where they're trying things themselves. They're going off. I've AIed it is the kind of verb that seems to be coined here. I think in other schools though, it's probably not as common. I feel that there isn't really there isn't that much guidance or practical guidance to implement it. And I think it's also like, I think some people maybe don't trust it, because there's a lot of scaremongering around it, isn't there? And it's not massive, Sean. It's not like the most important part of teaching. And I think where we've got to be careful is there's a lot of kind of probably companies out there that maybe want to create products that will do things that maybe we don't need AI for, like for example, chatbot for tutors and things like that. I think sometimes you've got to be careful that you're not losing the human side of the job, but definitely working with you, I think it can make you more efficient. The one thing I would say is, like, where I've found it best in the classroom is I've been able to create resources that are better and more creative than I would have been able to do myself, because the time it would take for me to create a revision infographic to look like what Notebook LM or Gemini produce in 30 seconds, it would take me hours and a graphic design suite that would cost thousands of pounds to do. So in the past, you just wouldn't have done that.
I think that's right. And I think just to finish off on that whole importance of the relationship between the teacher and the student being the most important thing, keeping it human in the loop, but not missing out on the fact that there are massive productivity gains with AI, and you can produce more engaging content and resources in a differentiated way for inclusive education in the classroom, can't you, John?
Absolutely. And also, you're not You're not kind of spending hours and hours on producing it. You know, you've got the idea. What I would say is you think you're the creative, critical thinking person, and you use your AI to execute your ideas. You know, and it will execute them in minutes what would take you hours. And then you've just got more energy to do whatever you want with. What I would say is like, as teachers, my advice would be, if you're saving 3 hours using artificial intelligence, you don't need to find something else in your job to fill those 3 hours. You know, you can get those 3 hours back in to your own leisure time or whatever, you know.
So just to finish off on, John, if there's teachers listening, educators and other people in the world of business that want to talk to you about AI, what's the best email address to reach out to you on?
So I've got my John Broadbent 34@gmail.com, and then I'm also on LinkedIn. As John Broadbent, yeah. And yeah, absolutely. And yeah, happy to help where I can. Yeah, thank you.
So it's been really good talking to you today, John. Thanks for joining Sean in the Shed. I really appreciate your time today, just talking from the world before AI to now this exhilarating new era that we're in. But you seem to be a real enthusiast and I think a trailblazer when it comes to how AI can be adopted in schools. And that's the important thing. It's making it useful, not just for reducing teacher workload, but for making the learning more engaging for the students at the end of it.
Yeah.